Welcome to Perspective and Potential, where we uncover new ways to see the world and tap into the incredible potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Straight, joined by my co-host and mother, Gwen Fund. Together, we'll explore ideas, stories, and strategies designed to help you grow, shift your perspective, and embrace a more complete version of yourself. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at perspectiveandpotential.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. In today's episode, we are going to talk about traditions. Traditions are kind of the rhythm of our lives, right? The familiar patterns that give meaning to the passing of time. They show up in the foods we cook, the foods we eat, the songs we sing, the stories we tell, and the way in which we come together. So, whether they're passed down through generations or created anew, traditions have a way of anchoring us, reminding us who we are, where we came from, and what we value most. In this episode, we're going to explore the beauty of traditions, why they matter, how they shape us, and what they teach us about connection, belonging, and identity. So let's start with a couple of questions. Have you ever stopped to think about why we hold on to certain traditions or where they even began? Maybe it's a family recipe, a holiday ritual, or some simple routine that's become part of your story. Okay, what is it about these patterns that makes them so powerful and lasting?
Well, you know me, I like to do definitions. And so I looked up the word tradition, and it comes from the Latin word tradiere, which means to hand over.
Hmm.
So we do hand over many things through traditions. We can hand over gifts, stories, music, values, wisdom, and valuable life skills a lot of times. Traditions are routine shared experiences that connect us to one another and to those who came before us in our families. They connect us to our cultures and to our religions. They create a heritage for us as we make and carry on memories and histories that bind us as humans and give us an anchor in this tempest of constant change that surrounds us. Um, so traditions kind of ground us in many ways. First of all, traditions tend to be regular events. We mark time and touch base with them at kind of preset intervals. It's like, going to church on Sunday or having family dinner together every night or a weekly game night with family or friends. Or sometimes traditions mark milestones in our life, like anniversaries or religious ordinances, graduations, quinceañeras, and sometimes they commemorate historical events or patriotic anniversaries like Memorial Day or the 4th of July here in the United States. But second, they bring us back to our connections and our values. It's so easy to get distracted by the constant hustle of life. So when we participate in regular traditions, they help us to stay on track with our families, our friends, and our communities. They give meaning to life's milestones, and they create kind of like a social glue that binds us together in our shared communities. And lastly, they really are a bridge to the past. Those who came before us pass on wisdom and values from one generation to the next. So traditions can be steeped in wisdom or virtue that has stood the test of time, like the law of the harvest that we just did, right? Lessons learned from histories of people or families can actually forge bonds between generations and spare the current population from repeating mistakes of the past.
I love hearing actually the root of the word tradition, to meaning to hand over, because I think that that really does give new depth to the meaning of tradition. It reminds us that what we do today isn't just about keeping something going, right? I think it's about intentionally passing on a piece of ourselves to others. We really can't take anything with us after this life, right? But we can give forward. So every time we repeat an event, or we tell a story, or gather for something that's familiar, we are actually building continuity between the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah.
Traditions really don't have to be grand or elaborate to matter. Some of the things that you mentioned were really some of the simple, just consistent things that brought that consistency and that grounding. Sometimes it is the smallest things, like a bedtime routine, a family saying prayer, a certain meal on Sundays, that end up actually holding the most meaning to us. They become touch points of love, connection, and belonging that remind us we're part of something bigger than ourselves, right? But we are part of that. And I think tradition also forms the roots. For me, I talk about this actually pretty often, that tradition forms the roots of community. It reminds us that we're not alone, even like subconsciously. Just being a part of that reminds us, hey, you're not alone, you are a part of this. And that we share history, we share purpose and identity with the people around us. And I think, knowing that, we recognize how important those traditions are for ourselves, but then it can also help us have understanding and perspective for other people's traditions and things that are very important to their culture and their beliefs. So whether it's a family, a neighborhood, a school, or a nation, traditions really are what strengthen the ties that bind us together, that give us that sense of belonging in a world where sometimes, with it being so fast moving, we can feel disconnected. And so I think that's truly the beauty of tradition. It's not just what's handed down, but it's what's handed forward, right? Every generation has the opportunity to keep the meaningful parts alive while creating new ones that reflect who we're becoming. So, I think it's fascinating to think that while some traditions are ancient and passed down through generations, others are being created right now, like we just talked about. Sometimes without us, sometimes, really, sometimes without us even realizing it. The choices we make, the routines we keep, and the values that we emphasize all have the potential to become traditions in their own way. So, this raises an interesting question. How are traditions created in the first place?
Hmm. Well, people create traditions as they set goals or define the values they want to build in their lives. Um, and usually, traditions are designed to bring people together and to strengthen them. So, like that family dinner every night. If you make that a sacred event, right? Everybody shows up for dinner. And then you know that you're going to touch base and be able to be interested in each other's day, how it went, and what your plans are. Just that one event will help the social glue that we talked about to strengthen the bonds between us. Now, when people get married, it's really interesting because each partner comes from a family that had its own set of traditions, right? And the two people have to refine each of those two sets of values and traditions and make a set that it will be unique to their family. Maybe they'll take this particular tradition from the wife's side, and they'll adopt another tradition from the father's side, and so that will make their particular family unique. But in the process, you're also connecting to both families as you set your new family traditions. And then, of course, we know that traditions are found in holiday observances, in the family cultures, but traditions are also set in our personal habits. You know, like uh, you can always, tell by, well, this person is going to be doing this at this time because that's just, their habit. And so it will to those around them become a tradition, right?
Mhm.
That that we respect each other's habits, or maybe we know that grandma has lunch at 12 o'clock, and if we show up, she's got a cookie for us, right? And it can become a tradition that at 12 o'clock we go to grandma's to get a cookie. So I think when we look at traditions in a simple form, it's how we make memories and create those bonds from one generation to the next. But that brings us to, of course, traditions are also found in holiday observances, but they can sometimes play a really negative role in our lives. Maybe we have a tradition of partying on Friday night and we lose all day Saturday, right? Maybe there's a tradition that, we get together with friends and use drugs or abuse alcohol. There are some religions that believe in, like female castration, for instance, which has a really negative effect on the young girl. So we have to realize too that not all of our traditions are positive.
Mhm.
And when we have children, especially, I think we need to be mindful of this because if mom and dad get drunk every Friday night, that's kind of a negative thing that we're actually passing on to our children without realizing it. I grew up in a generation where smoking was like an everyday thing, and it was advertised on TV, and our parents smoked, and without even realizing it, they were you that habit became a tradition that when you got to be a certain age, you were old enough to smoke. So I think we have to, be cognizant of the fact that um, that whatever we do habitually, it can be a tradition that we're handing over to the next generation.
Well, yeah, and I think what it says is that traditions don't just happen, they don't just happen to us, right? We're constantly shaping them. And we have choice in tradition. Every repeated action, every shared moment, every choice about what we prioritize becomes part of the legacy that we're building and that we're carrying forward. It's a reminder, I think, that tradition is powerful. There's a warm tone when we use the word tradition, but I think, like you've stated, traditions can they can either uplift and unite, or it can harm and divide. And so we have to be intentional about the kinds of traditions that we nurture, um, to help ensure that what we're passing down actually strengthens rather than weakens the generations that follow. And when we pause long enough to ask ourselves, okay, what am I handing over? What are we handing over? I think we begin to see then how every small act, every habit, every celebration can be an opportunity to hand something good over. We can hand over love, resilience, right? You think of like the Vikings, they had a lot of traditions that it was all about that resilience, connection, purpose. And when we stop to think about it, traditions aren't just about what we do, but they're about what those actions do for us. They shape how we connect, they shape how we feel grounded, and how we even see ourselves within a larger story. So, whether they're big annual celebrations or just small daily rituals, traditions play an important role in our emotional and our social well being.
For many years, I know you remember, it was cookies on the bar on Sunday. Always made cookies on Sunday, and oh my gosh, I had to make about 100 cookies to make it through at least most of the week with all of you guys. And we even have videos of you sitting on the bar, you know, helping Dad make cookies, right?
Yeah.
So positive traditions actually improve our physical health. They help us to learn to regulate our emotions, and they can ease our anxiety. We have something to look forward to. I remember as a little child, you know, the weeks before Christmas, right? You're so anxious and excited and everything, but you have to be patient. How's the little song go? Santa sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. So be good for goodness sake, right? So it helps, to learn those regulation of emotions, and they kind of act like a compass that points us toward common goals with those that we love. And again, they are that social glue. Uh, so, they bind us together with our families and with our ancestors in any way that they happen to appear. So I think we need to, like you say, be very cognizant of the values and the traditions that we're setting up and gluing basically onto our young ones. They create a sense of identity and shared values for each of us. And of course, the milestones, here again, we're looking at, the anxiety of being 12 years old and getting to go to this dance, right? But the the emotional regulation of being patient. Um, Wisdom, that is one of the things that traditions are geared toward. Um, just like, for instance, coming of age, the quinceañeras or whatever. The wisdom in that is until a young lady was a certain age, she wasn't ready to be introduced to society as a woman. And so there's a lot of wisdom that goes with that, generational connection, um, stories about our ancestors, and the things that they went through and the things that they accomplished can kind of give our next generation that that confidence that they too can accomplish great things. um, of course, we talked about they're very stabilizing. They stabilize us and help us have these touch points to come back to. They become emotional anchors for us, and they create memories, either good or bad. And they also build our community. When differing families come together to share a common ritual or a tradition, it builds community then. And then the many become one. It's a wonderful experience. It can be.
Well, it's amazing how something as simple as just a repeated practice can carry so much influence. Traditions strengthen not only our relationships, but like you said, our sense of identity and belonging. And they remind us that we're part of something that extends beyond ourselves. And what that does for our mental and spiritual and even our physical well-being, right? Where we are part of a family, a culture, a faith, a story that's being written. And so I think when we engage in meaningful traditions, we're creating these like emotional anchors that help us stay steady through life's constant changes. And that's, really something, it gives us something to look forward to. They give us a place to return to, both physically and emotionally, where we feel known, where we feel loved, where we feel connected. And in that way, tradition then becomes more than just habits or celebrations. They become the heartbeat of our homes and our communities, and they remind us who we are, like where we came from, and then as the root of the word, where we hope to carry forward and what we're passing on.
I think our family reunions are a great example of that. And, we don't have those every year. I don't think they have to be every year. But those are things that, keep families connected through the generations. And your little story that you tell of the hot chocolate on road trips as we went back to see family. Um, your dad never knew that was a tradition, but you did.
I was sure to remind him when everyone was asleep that our tradition was to stop and get hot chocolate.
And I think what's important there is the bond that was created between you and your dad.
Yep.
That, the feelings, I don't know, your feelings were being special or.
Yep, it for sure was. It was something that it was ours. I was not really going to remind him about that tradition if anybody else was awake. I was only going to remind him if everybody was asleep. It was ours. So, in this episode, we explored the meaning and impact of traditions, those shared experiences, rituals, events, routines that connect us to one another and to generations before us. We talked about how traditions act as an anchor in a world of constant change, giving us stability, belonging, and identity. We looked at how traditions are created, sometimes intentionally through the values we choose, and other times through the habits that we repeat without realizing it. Let us be challenged to reflect on what we're handing over to the next generation and remind ourselves that traditions are more than customs. They are lasting expressions of love, connection, and continuity. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, please be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Your input helps shape the conversation and makes perspective and potential even more impactful. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought.
Bon appetit.